Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Maine Planning Basics webinar. My name is Abe Daly, and I'm a senior planner with the Municipal Planning Assistance Program. These monthly webinars are intended for those new to the profession and those who are new to planning in Maine. And I'd like to remind people that we do post the presentation and the recording of these webinars on our website. I'll post the link in the chat. You may also sign up for the email updates about our trainings and webinars on our website by entering your email in the Get MPAP Grants Training and News box on our website. Today, we are joined by Pete Coughlan, Director of the MaineDOT Community Services Division, who will present basics about local road planning. So now I'll turn it over to Pete.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So when Abe got a hold of me, he told me this was primarily people that were relatively new to the business. I'm not one of those people. I've been around here at DOT for, let's see, 47 years. So that's before some of you were even born. But I still love coming to work every day, and my wife asks me every day when I'm going to retire, but I don't have a good answer for that yet. Also, and Joan, you've been around for a long time too, not 47, but it's been a while.
37.
Yeah. The other thing that's important is, as much as I love my job here at DOT, I spend more time on the municipal side because I counted the other day, I think I wear 13 municipal hats in 7 different towns. That sounds like a lot of work, but some of it is doing websites, some of it's addressing. I'm also the planning board chair in my town, the budget committee chair. I do a town newsletter, I do the website, and I got my fingers in 7 different towns, and it sounds like a lot, but that's what I do at night instead of watching TV because there's nothing good on. So what I wanted to do here today was just give you a broad perspective, and this is certainly not going to take an hour, but we can have some questions as we go, or whatever. This is pretty loose. But I just want to show you what we do here at DOT in the Community Services Division, which was created back in the mid-90s when Commissioner John Melrose was here. Some of these pictures that you see on the front here are different things that I'm going to talk about here, but I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. So I want everybody to understand here too that my focus is local roads. And I work with towns all over the state, all sizes, all levels, rural, urban, big, small, rich, poor, every corner of the state. I could be talking to the guy up in McQuahawk Plantation in the city of Portland the next half hour. So I've been dealing with all those folks for many, many years. We work with a lot of county folks because there's 10 out of the 16 counties that have road responsibilities. So busy all the time with all those folks, and that is a changing atmosphere too. As you know, on the municipal level, there's a lot of people coming and going, both at the administrative level, public works level, planning level, you name it, people are coming and going. So I do this with a small staff. It's basically me and Tammy. And I do have, by the way, 2 positions open. I have one position now for local road center, which is the training aspect of us. But I also have a position open that I just did some interviews this week, and I was not too happy with the results because we only had 2 people. So we just posted again today on the DOT website. It's a transportation planning analyst. So I'm going to put a little plug in for that. It involves some of the screens that I'm about to talk to here. So basically, I got 4 people that work in this office. And I want to make sure that we understand this is not, as you see on the bottom here, you probably all know Matt or Jared or Steve or Dakota. They are your DOT planners. They have different regions around the state. and they sit right outside the door here across the hall from me. But they're the ones that work with communities for planning on the state road system. So whether it's a municipal partnership initiative or the VPI, PPI, or BPI, which you probably all have heard of at this point, those community-based initiatives are all handled through those four folks there. So that is not what I do. I pretty much deal with local roads with some exceptions. So this is everything I'm going to hit real quickly. I got one screen for each here, and I'm just going to talk through each of these. I want to talk about the local road center, local road assistance money, classifications of roads in Maine, what's an urban compact, road inventories, what's the MUTCD, the RSMS software program. I also handle all the state and US route numbering in the state. And we also have some purchasing programs for towns, just like some of the regional planning commissions have around the state. But we're kind of responsible for helping towns get what you probably seen on the road out there for the speed feedback signs that tell you your speed is, or some of the rapid rectangular flashing beacons at pedestrian crosswalks, or even some of the newer school zone signing that you may have seen that now have the speed feedback sign attached to them, and they can be fully controlled from the school nearby. So I've got one screen for each of these things, and that's what I'm just going to go through each of them right now. So what's the local road center? Well, every state, it's a federal program. It was started back in 1982, and we came along in 1986 when the department hired George Greenwood, who was a professional of civil engineering up to Orono, and I came on board in 87, and I've been here ever since. But there's one per state, and we're based here in MaineDOT. And when you go over, like Monday, I'm going over to New Hampshire. I'm going to meet with my counterparts there, but that center is based at UNH up in Durham. Up in Vermont, it's based at the DOT. New York, it's based at Cornell. Massachusetts, it's based at UMass Amherst. So there's about 12 of us that are based at a DOT, and the rest are based at universities. There's a total of 56 of us across the country, and the other 6 are really places like Puerto Rico and some of the Native American tribes across the country. They have their own LTAP program for those Indian reservations. So our job is to provide technical assistance, and as you can see here in the second line, you name it, I get calls on it. Whether it's mud or pavement, otherwise known by a lot of people still as tar. That's TAH, by the way, still in Maine. Blip. Just the other day, I was talking to a selectman, and he was talking about tar on the roads this summer. Yeah, we haven't put tar on the roads in Maine for probably 50 years, but that's what people still call it. But I take questions on all of these things here, from traffic issues, speed limits, dirt roads, mud, pavement, you name it, culverts, water drainage, that seems to be a real common one. Pavements, culverts that are getting plugged up, or culverts that are too small. Winter operations, snow and ice control, salt priority, you name it, we get calls on it. And we do training on a lot of these things. We kind of been slowed down in our workshops across the state simply because I haven't had the staff. I've been down a person for 5 years now, and I'm about to open that position up again too. But a lot of what we do, it's Tammy and I right now, and I can't do everything. So our workshop schedule has slowed down. But I also work real closely with the Maine chapter of Public Works Association in Maine, and we've probably got well over 100 people that belong to that. And we're the ones that put on the Highway Congress up in Skowhegan. It's a big show up at the fairgrounds. We've got a supervisory program going on right now, leadership for public works guys and gals. We've got a program coming up at the Maine Municipal Convention in another month. We also run some spring programs with the chapter, but I work real closely with the public works folks around the state. We also do some of this equipment training, chainsaw training. We used to do some backhoe loader training and grader training. And also we have two other gentlemen that work for us under contract. For those people, those towns that call me and say, Pete, I really need someone to come out and look at this road. I can't figure out what to do with it. You know, the select board wants me to tar it all. And it's like, that's probably the worst thing to do. So Paul Brown is our road ranger, so to speak. It used to be Phil Curtis, but Paul is now available to go out to any town and work with them on site to try to advise. You know, Paul's not an engineer and we're not here to do engineering. We're here simply to provide some advice and someone to look at something and say, well, here's the problem and here's what you probably ought to do to fix it. Here are some options. Also, Jim Foster is available as our bridge ranger. And there are so many bridges in the state. And by the way, when I say bridge, I'm talking about anything over 20 feet. If it's between 10 and 20 feet, it's called a minor span by state law. And anything under 10 feet is called a culvert. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of those things around the state. But the state DOT inspects anything over 10 feet. So they send those results to towns. And when towns get these letters saying, here's the inspections, the results that we found, call Jim if you want some assistance to kind of help put this in perspective, to tell you, you know, this is something you probably ought to take care of right away, or here's something that you probably ought to start thinking about, because 5-10 years from now, you may have to replace this. I will say that it's fairly common to find towns that, with the way budgets are, that out of sight, out of mind. Even though you may get a DOT inspection report that shows you that you've got some serious issues down underneath, if you don't see it and the top looks okay, it tends to get a little neglected. And that's why you see more and more bridges being posted or closed, because the feds require that. Even though the letter comes from DOT that says you need to post that at X tons, that is really a directive from Federal Highway Administration. So it's all about public safety. It's not trying to be a pain in the butt, because when you post a bridge, that creates some serious issues because the plow can't go across it now, the school bus can't go across, the trash truck can't go across, and that creates lots of issues. So Jim is available to go out and help towns once they get these inspection letters to kind of advise towns on really what they ought to do and offer them some options. And once they consider that, then they can hire an engineer if they need to come in and design the bridge or replacement structure. So that's real quick what Local Road Center is all about. I work real closely with the other centers, especially in New England. That's why I'm going down to New Hampshire on Monday and Tuesday to see if we can beg, borrow, and steal from each other, because I don't like to reinvent wheels. If someone else got a good program on, say, paving, then I might steal that from Vermont, or they might steal something from me. I say steal, but we're all helping each other out. So that's enough about Local Road Center. Secondly, this was brought up by Abe. It'd be interesting to know, with all the towns that you deal with, how many of if you were to ask them, how many towns here have an actual road design standards? You may find that it may be less than half. There's a lot of towns that have subdivision regulations and subdivision standards, which is good. But with the way people buying property in Maine now, and people are buying stuff sight unseen, and they buy a house up on a road somewhere and they don't know who maintains the road, even though that's supposed to be disclosed in the real estate transaction. A lot of these realtors just don't know. They just put unknown on the disclosure statement. And then when it starts to snow and the town's not plowing it, that creates a problem right away. So I still find lots and lots of towns that have no standards whatsoever when it comes to accepting a road as a town way. As you probably all know, if a town is going to accept something, it has to meet town standards if they exist, and then it has to be adopted at a town meeting or by council vote, and hoping someone actually checked them against the standards. I was at a town meeting a couple months ago, right outside town here, and it was a private road, kind of short, and the town has very extensive road standard ordinance on this, right down to the details and fractions of inches of how things should be built. It got defeated at town meeting, rightfully so, because the road commissioner said it didn't meet the standards. Well, the people in the meeting all thought the standards was just the thickness of the pavement that was put down. Well, it says 3 inches, and yeah, we measured it was 3 inches, so it must meet standards. No, it didn't. No one ever checked it during construction, but bottom line here is Southern Maine Regional Planning Commission used to have a real good set of standards, and I don't know whatever happened to that. I used to have a link to it on my website, but I think it's disappeared. I don't think they've kept that up to date, but there was a lot of work that went into that thing. And I just don't know. In fact, if any of you have or know about a decent set of local road design standards that is kind of a guideline to go by, I'd like to know about that, because the Southern Maine one, I just can't seem to find anymore. So those standards are probably shouldn't be the subdivision standards, which have all the technical details. I'm talking about a road that someone's buying property on now, and there's 2 or 3 people that have built a house up in there now. That single road doesn't meet any standards. And if you don't have any standards, then you don't have anything to go by. The other thing I hear people do is say, well, it's got to meet state standards. My next question is, what do you mean by state standards? What state standards? You know, DOT doesn't have a standard for a local road design. We have standards for the materials, the construction techniques, but we don't have any geometrics or anything like that for a local road design. You know, DOT handles state roads. So, you know, a town really needs to make sure it has the right details when it comes to culverts and pavement and gravel and all that stuff, because if you accept whatever a contractor puts in and no one's checked it, town meeting accepts it, you've just bought whatever cost-cutting measures the contractor did without anyone ever checking it. So just bottom line on that is, I mean, I can show you some stuff, and I've got stuff on our website, but if anyone knows about a good set of standards that's out there now, like the Southern Maine Regional Planning one, let me know. Now let's just talk about this fun subject for a little bit. As you probably know, across the state, in any state, we have arterials, collectors, local roads. We have state highways, state aids, townways. Well, how do you know what all those things mean? Well, there's basically 2 levels of classification in any state. There's the federal stuff, which is the federal functional classification. That's where you hear the terms arterials, major collectors, minor collectors. That's federal terminology. On the state side, that first sentence there, state jurisdiction, that's when you hear the terms state highway, state aid, and townways. It's important to understand all of those classifications, and you can see all those things on the DOT map viewer, and you can turn on a button that shows you the classifications, the federal stuff. You can turn on a separate button that will show you the jurisdictional, state highway, state aid, townway things. And that affects who maintains what, who has capital responsibility for. And also you may have heard the term highway corridor priorities. That's a DOT thing that was created here oh, I'm saying 8+ years ago. And you may have heard some of our planners talk about that or seen it as part of the work plan, but things like Route 1, Route 2, Route 3, those are all corridor priority 1 corridor 4. And that's a separate button on Map Viewer that you can turn on to see that. I also get requests from towns to reclassify roads from town to state roads. I also get requests from other people, including DOT, to reclassify roads from state aid roads to town roads. It works both ways. And I've been dealing with those for decades. I got a letter a couple weeks ago from 2 adjoining town managers, and their state aid road, their local road, they felt should be a state aid road. Okay, we've got criteria for that. I'm in the process of analyzing that now, and we'll make a decision. And if it meets the criteria for being a state aid, my DOT maintenance office isn't going to be too happy that they're going to pick up a few miles of road, but I'm going to work with them. I'm going to work with the town, and I'm going to judge this decision on the criteria. Conversely, when I have a DOT get a hold of me, in fact, I had one just yesterday. They get a hold of me and say, Pete, we really don't think this road that gets 100 cars a day really is a state aid road anymore. In fact, it dead ends out in the field. Excuse me. And I find that to be true still in a lot of places in Maine, where there are state aid roads that basically are dead end and there's 2 houses and an old farm on it. How did that ever get to be? Well, I can tell you the history and I can look that up. And there was a reason for that at one time. But a road like that is really just serving local purposes and really should be a local road. So I send a letter to the town. I work with the town. I go out and meet with them. I give them the opportunity to tell me why this meets the criteria. And I'll take whether they get comments from a planning commission, any like you folks that might be asked to be involved in this, fine. The more input I can get, because I'm not going to sit here in Augusta and make a decision on a road when the people that live there, drive it, maintain it, know best. So I'm going to take everyone's input on this against the criteria and make a decision. So those things happen several a year. I've got a bunch of roads now that we've just recently changed from state aid to town way, with the towns agreeing. They didn't necessarily like the idea, but they really were just local roads. The bottom line in this whole thing is I don't care if you're a rich town or if you're a rural town, whether you've got 50 people live in town or 50,000 people in town, I'm going to be consistent from one corner of the state to the other. Part of the reasons we have classification conflicts now is because there were decisions made decades ago where consistency and following criteria, let's just say, was not necessarily followed. There were other reasons. I don't want to use the P word, but there are other factors that may have influenced how a road got classified. So I end up having to undo some of those things according to current criteria. But bottom line is I deal with this issue quite a bit. So you can see all of this on the map viewer, but for instance, just today, I was working with several towns down in southern Maine, where we've been talking about compact areas, which I'm going to talk about next. And we're changing some maintenance duties on a bunch of the compact areas which will change the map viewer. All right, so this last screen here, just to show you how the federal stuff on the left connects with the state stuff on the right. So when you hear about an arterial in the state of Maine, it's just like in your body. The artery is taking the bulk of the blood and it's feeding it off into the smaller veins in your body, which goes out to the little capillaries in your fingers and your toes. And that's the same thing in a road system. When you have things like the interstate or Route 1, Route 2, Route 3, all the major routes, those are the arterial roads that, yes, those are the state highways. They should be DOT jurisdiction. That's the big stuff. Those are the major corridors. On the bottom side of that, down at the bottom here, the local roads are ones that really feed houses, farms. They're not a mobility corridor, obviously. They're neighborhood streets. Those are town ways, and those are fully maintained by each town. In between here, you have these collectors. So on the federal side here, the major and minor collectors, those mostly summarizes the connection between this connects the federal and the state classifications. So I mentioned the route numbering. Yes, you've probably all seen this as you drive around. We have the state ones that show on the right side, which is a black on white rectangular sign. And on the bottom left here, we've got the US route numbering. These things don't change much. But when, for instance, up in Bangor Brewer right now, the 395 extension, in fact, it's not called the 395 extension, but it's connecting over to the airline Route 9. We're going to be making a bunch of both changes to these things because we have US route numbers up there, we have state route numbers. Bottom line here is when we need to change a state route number, it's simply an internal thing here and it just gets commissioner approval. When it comes to a US number, that's a different thing where I have to actually submit, I think it's twice a year now, there's actually a standing or sitting or kneeling committee on route numbering in the United States. I don't know what it's called, but there's a body of people that get applications from all over the country, and they review and approve the US route numbering system. So we just don't do that much here in Maine because there's not a lot of new construction, but there is that one going on in Brewer right now. And I remember another one up in Bangor a couple of years ago, but it's, you know, the route numbers that you see out there on the roads pretty much have been there for a long time. So I just wanted to mention that because that's another issue that I deal with in addition to the national highway system, which is a federal thing. We only have certain roads in Maine that are part of the national highway system that connect through every other state in the country. So any of those changes will ultimately go through me and the commissioner and so on up to the federal level. Let's talk about compact areas. Many of you probably know what this is all about, but I still find a lot of people, even internally here at DOT, when someone asks me about an urban area, my next question is, what do you mean, state urban or federal urban? Because there's two distinct differences there. When it comes to the state urban compact areas, that is all about maintenance. It is not about who is responsible for capital improvements and reconstruction and all that. It's about who maintains what. So when you see these signs on the right, which you probably have all driven by them, some of them today, that is where the DOT and town or city plow truck, striping truck, jurisdiction over driveways and entrances and utility cuts, all changes at that point right there. So as you're driving past this sign, you're probably coming into town. You're kind of coming out of, say you're coming out of Cornville and you're coming into Skowhegan. All right, you're out in the country, but you start to come into the dense part of Skowhegan or Auburn or whoever, and that's where the town or city takes over. So again, it's about maintenance. It's not capital. these compact areas have been around literally in state law since right around 1900. This is nothing new. Compact areas you can find in state statute back in like 1903. Definition was slightly different, but it's still there and the concept is still fine. But the last census, the 2020 census, I had 4 towns go over 7,500, and I had to work with them, and they knew this was coming, and they were getting ready for it. They knew they were going to become a compact, and they were going to pick up a bunch of mileage that DOT has always been maintaining through town. Now they are doing it. Those 4 towns were Cumberland, Berwick, South Berwick, and Hamden, just below Bangor. So I worked with each one of them, and we defined where that compact sign was going to go. And that's where the maintenance changes between DOT and the town now. I also have been reviewing these compact lines with a lot of towns. We have about 52 towns in Maine that are urban compact now. 51, 52, somewhere in there. Some of those compact lines haven't been reviewed in decades. So I have recently been meeting with Gorham and Westbrook and Wyndham and Standish. I've got more coming up here. Cape Elizabeth, Scarborough. In fact, just before I sat down at this computer here an hour ago, I was finishing up making the Cape Elizabeth compact area. I was making it official to what the town and the state had just agreed. Basically, when you went into Cape Elizabeth, if you were heading out to Two Lights, you go through the center of town there, and that was all compact. But then the road opened up, and it wasn't compact. And then when you get down near Two Lights, it was compact again. So what does that mean? Well, the town does work up to that point, and then the state takes over. And then when you hit the other end, the town takes over again. A lot of these compact areas were set by a gentleman that preceded me, and he was very meticulous about meeting the statute, because this compact areas talks about density of structures, and he was very good about that. But when it comes to a practical maintenance perspective of plowing and striping and so on, a lot of these things just don't make any sense. So that's why I have recently sat down with all of those towns I just mentioned, and they all readily agreed, this is kind of dumb. It just doesn't work. Why? Like if you take the river road from Westbrook to Wyndham, it's in and out of compact about 6 times. So it's the town, it's the state. It's the town, it's the state. Just back and forth. That makes no sense. It's totally confusing on who's responsible for phone calls and complaints and maintenance and so on. So we worked with each of these towns, and they all readily agreed to pick up these gaps. So now, town of Cape Elizabeth, all state roads in Cape, like Route 77 and Spurlink Road, that's all in compact now. This will all be shown on map viewer, and you can see down on the bottom right here, if you turn on the state urban link in the map viewer, it'll show up in that little tan area, so you can actually see the compact areas. So that means when you see that inside the compact, the town maintains everything, and outside the compact, the state maintains everything on the state roads. By the way, towns get paid quite a bit more LRAP money for those state duties, those town duties on state roads inside the compact. Road inventories, this is really important, and I do a lot of these things with towns. In fact, I'm meeting with the town of Elliott next Tuesday. There's a lot of reasons why it's important to have an accurate road inventory. Obviously, for 911 purposes, or comp plans, or local road assistance. I work directly with the 911 Bureau over the PUC because like myself, one of my 4 hats I wear on the municipal level, I'm an addressing officer in 4 different towns. So when I have to do addresses or make road name changes, I do my job, go onto the 911 website, and I make the changes. Many people don't know this, but when a change is made in the system at the PUC, They send me the information over here to DOT. So if say a subdivision went from a private subdivision and the town accepted it as a town way, the addressing officer should go in the system and change that from private to public. The 911 Bureau will let me know about that, and we'll change it in our system. So now when you look in Map Viewer, you'll see a road that shows as public maintenance. If we don't hear from them, nothing changes. So we depend highly on the addressing officers in every town to do their job. It's interesting when I go through towns and I go out and meet with them. One of the first questions I ask them is, do you have an inventory of all your roads? Do you have a spreadsheet or something? And I'm surprised there's still so many towns that can't put their finger on a piece of paper or a spreadsheet where they can list all their roads. A lot of towns do, but there's still a lot of them that just don't have that list. Another thing I like to ask is, do you have a list of all your town roads with their right-of-way widths from A to Z? Probably 8 out of 10 towns that I talk to can't do that. So if you don't know what your right-of-way widths are, how do you know how to respond when someone calls you about a tree or a rock wall or an erosion problem or whatever on the side of the road? Is that in the right-of-way or not? If you don't have a right-of-way list, you are just guessing. So I work with towns all the time to update their road inventories, but we primarily rely on the addressing offices now to do their jobs. And when they send that into PUC, they will let me know at DOT, and that's what ultimately you'll see on the map viewer. MUTCD, what is it? I think probably many of you know what this is. It's a federal document that's been around for just about 100 years now. We're on the 11th edition. The latest just came out in January. But the reason you see stop signs that look the same in every town, or double yellow center lines, or work zones, or whatever, if it's a traffic sign, if it's a traffic device, it's based on this manual right here. It's on the website. You can just Google MUTCD and everything's right there. I also have hard copies printed here, and we're going to be doing training across the state soon. As soon as I can get the changes from the feds, I'm going to do training for towns across the state on what's new between the 2009 edition and the 2024 edition that just. I get calls all the time from towns on traffic issues. Like, Pete, do we need to put up a stop sign at this intersection? Can we put up a yield sign? Do we need any of that at all? What about striping? Do we need stop bars? How big do the stop signs have to be? Whatever. They could easily get the answer by looking in the MUTCD, because that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to say, and I send this all the time, I send, look at section 2D 38. There's the picture of the speed hump sign that you should put in just before the speed hump that you just put in the road. You need to sign it right, you need to stripe it right, but here's the right way to do it. So this is a whole subject we do training on, and every town, really, it's a federal law that says that all roads that are open to the public. So notice I didn't say public versus private roads. I said all roads that are open to the public. So that means state roads, town roads, the roads up through a university campus, the roads through the mall, any place that is open to the public. A stop sign should look the same as it does out on a public way. So this standard is something that applies in every state. So when you go through Wyoming or Montana or Maine, all these traffic control devices should look the same because everyone should be following the MUTCD. All right, I'm going to mention this. We've had around for a long time. It's gone through a lot of iterations, but this is a planning tool that towns can use to put together a maintenance or a capital plan for their local roads. It's software. I remember back in the days where I was typing C:\DOS. Back in those days, that's what you did. But now with the Windows version, we actually got this from New Hampshire many, many years ago. It's pavement management for towns. And we hired a gentleman named Don who lives out in Reedfield, who programmed a brand new program for us back in 2010. And then he put out a 2016 version. And we have lots of towns using this thing. The only problem recently is that as Windows upgrades their Windows versions, the current RMS version is written in Windows 7, and we find some towns that have just bought some new computers with Windows 10 or 11, and sometimes they don't talk, and we have issues. So we had to hire Don to come back, and he's working again for us. And he's going to each of these towns and working with their hardware and their software to make this work. But we've had, I don't know how long the spreadsheet is, but we've got lots and lots of towns and out of states and counties. I mean, we even had someone from Thailand, I think, order it from us. But it's a really simple program. It's very complicated behind the scenes to make it simple on the surface. But basically, when a town buys RSMS, they get a map of their town with all their local roads and state roads shown on it. Then they have to go out and do a condition survey, windshield survey, and check stuff off like in a tic-tac-toe box, looking at cracks and ruts and so on. And then there's a repair strategy list in there with costs per square foot to pave or crack seal or whatever. That's something else. We just hired Don to come back and update those costs for us, because obviously costs have changed. And with that, a town can go out and survey everything and develop a multi-year plan to do capital work or maintenance work. They can take photographs, they can put records in there, they can put history of maintenance. They can do lots of good stuff with this. Plus, we also had Don add a sign inventory version to it, so people can go out and collect all their sign information. But bottom line is, we got a lot of towns using this, and they're using it for justifying when they go to town meeting, because the town highway budget is usually subject to, let's just say it's an easy target to reduce. Well, let's just cut it by 100,000 this year just to save money. Well, okay, if you do that, you're just putting yourself further down the deterioration curve. It's just like the rust on your car or the hole in your roof. If you let it go, it's going to get worse and get more expensive to fix. So the bottom line is to keep the good roads good and try to maintain the junky roads, and those are the ones that are going to cost a lot of money. But one of the best things you can get out of this program are these two things here. You get a bar chart on the left that kind of shows you how many miles end up in those 5 categories. The idea here is to get more of them on the left side, because that tells you got a lot of good roads that don't need a whole lot of maintenance. But when you do a full analysis on a town and find that you got big stacks over on the right side here, then that tells me you got a bunch of junk. You got roads that are hurting, you haven't spent any money on for a while, and you're going to have to raise a lot of money. With that, on the right side here, you get all these results that show up on a map. Take those same colors, like notice red is reconstruct. All your roads that need reconstruction are going to show up in red. This is a great tool to show to the budget committee of the town meeting and say, here's the status of our road conditions in our town. And, everyone thinks it's the worst road in town. Well, when you look at something like this, you realize that your road is now going to be put in perspective, and you are not the worst road in town. But these are 2 great tools to summarize the conditions in a town, and then you can go forward and help to prioritize and maybe raise the highway budget instead of cutting it. So lastly here, these are some of the programs that we've had to help towns. I know some of the regional planning commissions put out, they have joint purchasing programs for salt and heavy load limited signs and other things like that. We do something similar. Tammy here puts out an email every late winter and solicits towns if they want to buy salt under the state contract, which simply means tell us how many tons, and we'll simply get a price for you. There is no commitment here whatsoever. No town has to order or feel they're committed. All we're doing is they're telling us, basically, we need 3,000 ton, and we want to know what the state price will be. Once we get that, after it goes out to bid, we ask them, here's the price, take it or leave it. What do you want to do? And that's where they have to commit at that point. We don't have to do that, and that creates a lot of work for Tammy. But we feel it's the right thing to do to give this year. I think we had upwards of 150 towns across the state that are actually part of the state contract. Some of these devices also you see out on the road, as I mentioned, the RFBs at pet crossings or the speed feedback signs, the school crossing signs, or now this last item here, those heavy rubber mats that you see in the middle of a road at a cross section, a crosswalk. I don't particularly care for those things, but they stand about 4 foot tall and they get run over all the time. Those things can go for like $500 a piece now. But Steve Landry actually bought a bunch of those, and we're going to be putting those out into towns. So we have some of these things still available. We're still taking and have a waiting list for some of these things. But I will tell you that the speed feedback signs by themselves, we did that. We offered that to towns for probably the last 8 years. And Steve decided that we're not going to offer those to towns anymore. They are now putting those up through the DOT traffic engineers, working with the towns on where they think they're needed. For instance, when you're cruising up a road somewhere and you're going 55 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden you kind of come down into this small town, people still tend to drive too fast, and those are the places that these things are effective. So Steve decided that we weren't just going to keep giving away these speed feedback signs for towns to use on their own. Plus, we also found that the people that picked these up and took the training and knew how to program them and get the data off, I bet if we went back and looked now, half of those people are gone, and these things are sitting on the side of the road and no one knows how to run them. And that's not good, because we spent a lot of money on these things, but there's no one there that knows how to run that thing anymore. So that's another reason why Steve kind of wanted to have the DOT take these over and maintain them and pull data off. But the school zone signs, the RFBs, we still have waiting lists for people that might want those things. So that's all I got to say here. That was a lot of talking, but there's my contact stuff, and I'm open for any questions. I went 50 minutes here, so who's got what here?
Abe is having internet issues, so he keeps dropping off.
Okay.
We have a half hour. It's more than a half hour now. It's a great time to ask Pete any and all questions about local roads or putting pedestrian signs in your downtown roads, in your villages. I do want to say, besides, thank you, Pete, as always, great presentation. You're a wealth of knowledge. The road surface management data provides valuable information for the capital investment plan, capital improvement plan for the town, but also for your comprehensive plan. There is a lot of information that can help at your town meeting or council level, as Pete said, for budgeting, but there's also a lot of utility in terms of your long-range planning processes. Hi, Julie, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Joan. I actually have 3.
Go for it.
Thank you for that great presentation. It's so nice to meet you, Peter, and thank you for your work. 3 questions. The first, you mentioned that there's an MUTCD training for municipalities coming. I was wondering if that is going to go into the recent update and changes, and maybe aspects that MaineDOT is looking to, since there's that 2-year window for adoption and integration, if there are any priorities that MaineDOT is looking at in terms of local roads. The second question is regarding those federal functional classifications. I love the public map viewer. I use it all the time in my work. So my question is for minor and major collectors that go through communities like main streets or residential areas. I was wondering if there's any, with those analysis that you're doing with the reclassifications, how that is reconciled with local context, you know, and roads that are collectors, but that function much more as almost like local roads. And then I guess in terms of the purchasing program, if there are any, I think there's a unit that lends out like other data collection tools, things that communities can look at for traffic calming pilots on local roads. I know there's the demonstration project process for state roads, like state aid roads, but specifically local roads. So.
Yeah, so the MUTCD stuff, yes, every state has up to 2 years, which means January of 26. I talked to Landry the other day, and he still said it's probably going to take us a good part of the 2 years to actually adopt it here as MaineDOT, because there's several things that have been changed in there relative to signing, striping. They have to change their specs, their contract books, and all that stuff. So who knows when that's actually going to be, but maybe there'll be sometime in 2025 where DOT officially adopts it. When it comes to towns, I think if you were to ask attorneys, they'd probably say a town would have to officially adopt this thing. But not being an attorney, I just know that federal law says that every agency that's responsible for public roads that are open to the public have to comply with this manual, whether you adopt it or not. So I'm not sure the legal aspects of that, but I would think that if there was an accident or something and someone started digging and asking Public Works Director, why didn't you have a stop sign there? Or why do you put single yellow lines down when there should be two? You'd have a problem trying to justify that. So when we do the training, in fact, it was supposed to be a federal highway guy up here next week, but he had to cancel. And I actually heard him out in Albuquerque back in July. His presentation was, what's the differences between the 09 and the 23? I was looking forward to that. But as I sat there most of the day, number one, he wasn't exactly a dynamic speaker. And number two, I overall gave it a value of 3 out of 10 because I didn't get much out of it. There are a bunch of changes. One little one I picked up on was prior to the 09 edition, a curve sign, just a standard black arrow curve on a diamond-shaped, yellow sign. If you wanted to put an advisory lower speed on that, it was a separate plate you would put underneath the diamond-shaped sign on the U-channel. When the 09 edition come out, and you've probably seen as you drive around, you see one sign with a curve, and there's a number right underneath inside the curve on that same sign. So when you look at it, there's a curve sign, and it suggests you ought to go 35 around the curve. No second plate underneath it. Well, guess what they've done in the new edition? They've taken that out and said, research has found that that's confusing to drivers, so we're going to go back and have people put the number as a separate plate underneath the arrow. To me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But it's stuff like that. It's little stuff. There's some other things that relate to road striping widths and other things like that that I just haven't dove into yet to find out much substantive stuff. But when we do our training, Eric and Steve and others will get the notice of that, and we'll do those statewide. And our focus will be what's different in each section. So signs, striping, signals, work zones, railroad crossing, bike crossings, we'll cover all of that stuff. Now I forgot the second thing. Oh, the classification stuff. Yeah, so what I did, probably Joan will remember this because I did that with her down at ATRC. What I do, and this was probably, almost 20 years ago now, I worked through the MPO, the PAX region, and their technical committee, I remember sitting down, just like I did with Joan and at Androscoggin Valley. We reviewed all of the classifications in the entire PAX MPO. We went through and agreed on the arterials. We agreed on the collectors, and what was left was local. And that really is why you see what you see in Map Viewer today, because it was a collective effort between the MPO, the municipalities, and me to determine how these roads function. So, because we had a mess before. For instance, what is it? What's the road that goes around Baxter Boulevard, around Back Bay? Thinking back to this screen in the middle here that related the federal classifications to the state side, Baxter Boulevard was always a federal arterial and a state townway. Totally wacky. So when we met, we agreed that really ought to be a collector because it goes around the bay, whereas Route 1 and Tukey's Bridge is the arterial. So we decided that it should be a collector state aid, and that's what you'll see on Map Viewer now, because that was a collective decision of the group. So we went through Yarmouth and Freeport, Portland down to Biddeford, Saco, and we did all of that review. The other thing I did, probably, it was pre-COVID, geez, it's probably been 7 or 8 years ago now. I was at the Cumberland town office, and I had a bunch of Southern Maine communities there, and I'm not sure if Yarmouth, Freeport were there, they probably were, where we were looking at the major versus minor collectors. Because prior to 2013, the federal guidance simply said in a federal urban area, not a state compact now, federal urban area, MPO, you could only have major collectors. There was no such thing as a minor collector. Well, since 2013, that's changed, and now we can do that. So we at that meeting, we went through every town and we kind of agreed upon all the, like when you turn on federal functional class now in Map Viewer, you'll see everything's purple, major collector. And I did this with Joan too down in Auburn. We decided what was major, what was minor, following the criteria. And in fact, I have not changed any of that yet. So you'll still see a whole bunch of major purple collectors there. But we still had some disagreements, or not disagreements. We didn't totally agree on what some of the major and minor should be. Plus, we also found, especially in towns like Lewiston, they've posted for trucks a lot of major collectors, and I don't want to be. All I want to say here is that state law says and state rule says that no town or city can, well, actually it's in an affirmative wording. It says all vehicles, trucks, cars, whatever, have the affirmative right to drive on a state or state aid highway, which means that a town or city cannot post nighttime hours, engine braking and all that stuff. You can't post a state road or limit trucks on it. They have to go through. But there's, I actually see it quite often. I see it in a lot of cities I drive through. You see these posted signs up. And if someone was to challenge that, they might find that that's may not work. But I'm not going to get into that legal side of things. But bottom line is that big review we did 20 years ago is probably still okay, but it probably wouldn't hurt if you or someone else wanted to have a meeting and talk about some of the classifications now that it's 20 years later, because things change, growth occurs and development happens and functionality of roads change, and you know, that sort of thing we probably ought to look at maybe again. And what was the third thing you had, Julie?
Traffic, devices that might also be part of the either purchasing program or the, I think there was a equipment lending program for municipalities to do data collection for like 2-week periods on local roads.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of that's a loaner is the traffic counting equipment. You may have seen that, but our traffic division upstairs here, they have equipment available, and all the town has to ask is say, hey, can I borrow the accounting equipment for, I think they'll let you take it for 2, 3, 4 weeks if you needed it. So you could get a hold of Aaron, you could get a hold of me, but Aaron's name is on the website. You have to come to Augusta. He'll give you the equipment. He'll give you a quick training on how it works and show you how to spread it around on different streets, how to collect the data. And then you bring it all back and they'll process all the data for you. And they will actually put that ADT information on the map viewer and give you the data. So it's all free. All you have to do is come up and get the stuff and run around town and collect whatever you want. That's the only equipment loaning stuff that I know of right now. The other stuff I talked about there in the end was simply grant stuff, which it's yours. You know, you take the speed sign, you take the school sign, it's yours.
Great, thank you so much.
Yep. One thing I don't think I covered here, I think I left it out, was the local road assistance program. Just quickly, all of you probably know that every town gets local road assistance money from DOT. The pot this year is $25 million. And that is spread to every town, strictly based on what a town has for road inventory in my system. So if your mileage is wrong, your town ways are off, you're getting the wrong dollars. For instance, if a town accepted a subdivision and made it town roads now instead of private, and no one told us, the addressing officer didn't change it, I don't know about that. It still shows as private in map viewer, and you're not getting your money for it. So local road assistance money is simply grant money that the town signs for every year. It's for capital improvements on your local roads. And we simply send you a check every November and you sign a form during the summer. In fact, we send all those forms out 2 months ago. We decided 2 years ago to do the DocuSign thing because otherwise we were sending out 500 letters in 500 separate envelopes and processing 500 letters when they come back in the mail. And that takes a lot of time. So now we do the DocuSign thing and people get an email. And I think we've got 400 out of 500 back already so that we can send checks out in November. It was kind of interesting there when we went to that because some of these smaller towns, they call me up and say, Pete, I can't do that DocuSign thing because I don't have the right software. I don't have the right computer. We don't have the modern equipment in our office here. I can't do can you send me the paper? And I said, well, I'd rather not. You know, do you do email? Yeah. Well, all you have to do is open your email and sign it. I don't know how to do that. Send me the paper. So I sent him paper at a few places, but there's one person in a small town, and he was a elementary school teacher. He said, Pete, I can't do this. You need to send me the paper. I said, why? I said, because I don't have that fancy stylus to sign it on the screen. You don't need that when you DocuSign. You just sign it on the sign. So, but for the most part, DocuSign works pretty good, and we do that all now and send out $25 million a year. That is 9% of the highway budget. So it floats with the DOT budget.
Are there other questions for Pete? Medea, did I see your hand up? No? Okay. Pete, when I worked at the regional level, because I did transportation planning, I was able to get into your list, sign on to your listserv. And thank you, you just added me again. Can Maine's planners also get into the local road center listserv so that they can see when you have the trainings and potentially sign up for some of your training sessions?
Yeah, in fact, that's why we encourage people to do this, because you go to the local left about signing up for the listserv. All you do is fill that out. Tammy gets the thing, and if she's, just make sure you say, you're the planner for so-and-so, because sometimes we'll get some spam stuff, someone's selling something and we go, that doesn't look right. So as long as we know you're a legit planner somewhere in town in the state of Maine, sure, we'll put you right on. And then we send out stuff quite a bit, just news about what's going on in Maine, local roads, workshops coming up. We use that every day.
Great. Thank you, Julie, for posting the address to the local road center. Okay, Pete, I talked to somebody yesterday and they were driving home and they didn't know until they went around the truck that the truck was spraying wet paint on. They were striping the road. There was no vehicle behind it indicating wet paint ahead, and they have paint on their car. Is there a recourse for that? What do they do?
First question is, which road was it and who was doing the striping?
State Road DOT.
Okay, so when I hear state road, was it in compact or not? Because if it was in compact, it wasn't DOT.
It was not compact.
If it was actually a DOT truck, it's hard to believe that there was nothing behind it, because every time I see those guys striping, there's trucks that sit back from the actual paint truck. And, people still are going to drive over stuff and do crazy things. But there is a way to file a claim. You go through right next to me here, Bill O'Connor is in our legal office. People just have to send a claim through him, Bill O'Connor, and he'll follow it through from there. And he's going to ask the questions: where, when, who. Are you sure it was DOT? And then he's going to get hold of the crew, because they all have GPS on their truck and they know exactly where the truck was at a certain time and minute. So he'll look at all that stuff and then see if there's any negligence on the part of the driver. Because you see that all the time, people tracking paint, people just in a hurry.
I was surprised that there wasn't a vehicle behind it, because they drive by my house and I see the truck following. But thank you.
Hey, one other thing I just thought of here, when it comes to comp plans and road inventories, we are going to be posting on our website, hopefully sometime soon. By the way, the DOT website is undergoing yet another review and remodeling. And it still may be a couple months, but the DOT website format and view is going to change. I hope for the better. But at some point, what we're going to do is have anybody's going to be able to go onto our website and print off a list of all the roads in a town, public and private. So in addition to being able to see all that on the map viewer, there's no way right now, other than someone emailing and Pete, can I get the spreadsheet? We're going to actually develop that spreadsheet for every town, A to Z. And so you'll see every state highway listed, every state aid road listed, every local road listed, and then we're pulling all the data in from the 911 Bureau, which will have all the separate private roads listed per town with the mileages. So they've told me they didn't want to put this up on the current website. They wanted to wait until the new one got finished. So it's probably still going to be a couple months.
That's great. That's going to save you time, but also getting the information directly into the hands of the municipalities and the public is always a good thing.
And realtors too, because the reason we're doing this, because I was put on this new legislative commission, which some of you may have heard of, the Abandon and Discontinue Roads Commission in the state of Maine. This is a huge, huge issue where people are buying properties on discontinued and abandoned roads, some knowing, some not knowing. And so as this thing unfolded, someone said, well, DOT ought to have a list or be able to see on a map what's a public road and what's a private road. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. So what we're hoping is that realtors in the state, when they start selling property, they go to the map viewer and are able to tell someone right now, yes, that is town maintained, or nope, you're on your own. That's a huge, huge, huge issue.
Are there any other questions? Does that information cause anybody to think of new questions or issues that have come up? What have you always wondered about your roads but don't know?
I can think of an issue related to that, the road access, because I know of someone that bought property in Cape Elizabeth. It was actually property that was seized by the IRS and sold at auction. And they bought it only to find out that there was no public road to access the property, and the road that they thought they could use was privately owned, and that became a big challenge for actually developing the property. And when I hear about this decommissioned road issue, I think it's an issue in Piscataquis County or some remote part of Maine, but it's not just in more rural parts of Maine, it's in southern Maine too.
Yeah. Oh, some of the stories we heard, I mean, some of these people that were in those same situations, families, moms, you know, coming home from the grocery store where, you know, their house is up this road that they've always been able to drive to. And we heard stories about machetes and bullets and blood and hospitalization because some guy said, basically, no freaking way you're going to go up this road to your house anymore because it's my road. You're not going on my road. And it's like, what do you mean? I can't go home? That's right. And there's gates going up and there's bloodshed happening across the state of Maine because people are blockading roads, which might be private roads, but trying to find the answer to what's a public easement, what's truly private, what's public, is part of our task. And it's not exactly fun because it's such a massive problem. And to hear some of these stories, I mean, we had one lady that was crying because she had her kids in the car and the guy wouldn't let her go home. Like, what do you want me to do? You're not going home. So just finish that off. Just understand that in Maine, we have, when people use these two words kind of interchangeably, discontinuing a road and abandoning a road, two different things. Discontinuance is a separate process. Ultimately, there's like 12 steps now. There's a town meeting vote or a council vote. There's a registry of deeds recording. It's a process, step by step by step. Abandonment has always been the lack of use or maintenance by a town for something like 20 or 30 years. Just the passage of time made it abandoned. But that law has changed now. So now they've added some process into that. So whenever I hear those words, I usually can tell that they're using them interchangeably when they have two very distinct terms. I just thought one other thing. On the map viewer, if some of you haven't never had a need to, if you wanted to know where the old county layouts were, like back in the 1800s, if you went to map viewer and did a search for right-of-ways or old county right-of-way layouts, you can add those to your list and you can find data on a particular road if you clicked on it from 1857 as described in volume 4 of the Cumberland County Records, page 362, 1875, is laid out as a 4-rod road.
That's really interesting. I happen to live on an old county road in Raymond. The deed on the property that I live on, it references the old county road. And it's become a modern, I mean, it's a local road, but it's kind of used as a highway.
Yeah. By the way, Meg, I'm not plugged in here. My battery just said I'm low, so I might disappear here.
Okay, well, it might be a good time to wrap it up because I don't know if anyone else has any questions, but thanks for joining us today, Pete.
Sure.
And thanks for covering all this information and mentioning the discontinued and abandoned roads commission. So that concludes our session for September. Our next Maine Planning Basics webinar will be on Friday, October 4th, when we will have a presentation about MaineDOT's community-based initiatives and active transportation planning.
There you go. Is that Dakota?
Yeah, Dakota and Matt Drost.
Okay. Yeah, they're right outside the door here.
Oh, great. So yeah, well,
Hey.
back-to-back DOT webinars.
Can you put me on your list too so I can get your stuff?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
All right, thanks for joining us today and have a good rest of the day, everyone.
All right. Good. Have a good weekend,
Thank you, Pete.
everybody.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks,
All right,
guys.
sure. You're welcome.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.